The palace was built from living crystal. It rose like a shard of frozen starlight from the plains of Aerith Prime, its towers bending gently as though they were listening to the wind. The walls shimmered in shades of violet and silver, responding to the bioluminescent skies above. Even the air inside hummed faintly, resonating with the neural lattice woven through the structure. To humans, it was beautiful. To the Varelian Empire, it was sacred. And on the day the palace fell silent, that sacred place became a tomb. I, the human in the Court of Light. Sergeant Elias Ward never intended to become part of galactic history. He had enlisted in the United Terran Coalition Peacekeeping Corps for reasons far simpler than glory. His home on Mars Colony 7 had been little more than dust storms and broken infrastructure. He wanted stability, a paycheck, a chance to see something beyond rust-colored skies. He did not expect to be assigned to the personal guard of Empress Nerith Valis of the Varelian Empire. The Varelians were tall, willowy beings with skin like polished pearl and eyes that glowed faintly in low light. Their hair shimmered like strands of fiber optics, changing color with mood and emotion. They were ancient, refined, and terrifyingly intelligent, and they ruled half the Orion Arm. The alliance between Earth and Varelia was fragile. It had been forged after a war neither side wished to repeat. Humans were considered impulsive but brave. Varelians were considered elegant but distant. Elias stood at the foot of the Empress's dais every day, a lone human among luminous giants. At first, he felt like an intruder. Then he noticed something no one else did. The Empress was tired. Nerith Valis did not appear weak. Varelian rulers never did. She wore robes woven from starlight silk, and her crown floated inches above her head, orbiting in delicate rings. But Elias noticed the subtle pauses in her speech, the way her glow dimmed slightly when the court grew heated. He noticed because humans were good at reading exhaustion. They lived with it. The palace functioned on psychic resonance. The Varelians shared thoughts in a quiet, constant stream beneath their spoken language. It made court debates efficient and dangerous. Lies were nearly impossible. Except humans could not hear the stream. Elias was an island in the mental ocean, and that made him useful. 2. The conspiracy no one heard. It began with silence. Varelian halls were never truly quiet. There was always the faint harmonic hum of shared consciousness. But one morning, Elias noticed something wrong. The hum dipped, like a skipped heartbeat. The Empress faltered mid-sentence during a trade summit. Her glowing eyes flickered. Around her, several nobles exchanged glances so subtle that only someone watching their physical movements, not their mental signatures, would notice. Elias shifted his stance. He watched Lord Kareth, High Chancellor of Strategic Defense. Kareth's hair glowed a brilliant, artificial blue, too bright, almost performative. His expression remained serene, but his fingers twitched against the crystalline rail. Something passed through the room. A pulse. Then the hum resumed. No one reacted, except Elias. That night, he reviewed palace security feeds. He had access because humans handled much of the external tech systems. The Varelians preferred organic integration. Humans preferred redundancy and firewalls. He saw a microsecond blackout in the neural lattice. Someone had injected a command. Not a physical intrusion. A psychic one. Elias didn't understand Varelian thought streams, but he understood sabotage. He went to the Empress. Protocol forbade direct address outside formal hours. But Elias had learned something about Nerith. She valued honesty over ceremony. He found her in the astral garden, where luminous vines climbed into the air without support. "You risk much, Sergeant," she said softly, without turning. "Your mind is loud tonight. Your Majesty," he replied, bowing. Something's wrong in the lattice. Her glow dimmed slightly. You cannot hear it.
No.
But I can see it. He showed her the recording. For the first time since he had known her, Neritha's composure cracked. They are testing the silence, she whispered. 3. When the palace fell silent. The attack came during the ceremony of convergence, when the Empire's regional rulers gathered in person. The throne chamber glittered with hundreds of bioluminescent figures. The neural hum was at its strongest. Until it wasn't. It didn't fade. It stopped. Total silence. For the Varelians, it was like going blind and deaf simultaneously. Their shared consciousness vanished. Panic rippled through the hall, but without telepathy, it manifested in physical confusion. Elias felt nothing change. He saw everything. Lord Kareth stepped forward, blade of crystalline energy forming in his palm. You are unfit to rule, Kareth declared, voice echoing unnaturally loud in the psychic void. The Empire stagnates under your hesitation. Gasps, audible gasps, filled the chamber. Nerith rose from her throne. You would fracture our unity. I would restore strength. The blade flashed. Elias moved before thought caught up. He lunged across the dais, tackling the Empress aside. The blade meant for her heart pierced his abdomen. There was no searing burn at first. Just pressure. Then heat. He heard someone scream, perhaps himself. Kareth tried to strike again, but palace guards regained their bearings. Without the neural hum, they moved slower.
Clumsier.
Humans were already accustomed to silence. Elias grabbed Kareth's wrist, forcing the blade sideways. It sliced through his armor, grazing bone. He twisted with every ounce of Martian gravity-hardened strength he possessed. Run, he shouted at the Empress. But she did not. Instead, Nerith placed her hand against Elias's chest. The neural lattice surged. The silence shattered. Sound, psychic sound, exploded back into existence. The Empress had rebooted the palace network using her own biocore. Every Varelian in the chamber felt the betrayal simultaneously. Kareth staggered as thousands of minds recoiled from him. He tried to flee. He did not make it 3 steps. 4. The cost of a blade. Elias collapsed once the threat was gone. Crystalline medics surrounded him, their hands glowing as they attempted to interface with human biology. It is incompatible, one murmured. Their neural pathways do not align. Stabilize him manually, Nerith commanded. She knelt beside him, crown rings dimmed and trembling. Why? She whispered to him as his blood darkened the luminous floor. He managed a weak smile. Guess I'm not used to quiet rooms. Her eyes flared with emotion, bright violet grief. The wound was catastrophic. The blade had disrupted more than flesh. It carried neural disruptors meant for Varelian physiology. In a human body, it caused cascading cellular collapse. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days. When he awoke, it was not in a hospital chamber. It was in the astral garden. Nerith sat beside him. You were easier to repair than anticipated, she said softly. He blinked. I thought I was dead. You were, she replied. And she explained. Varelian rulers possessed a forbidden ability. They could partition fragments of their own biocore to stabilize another being. It was dangerous. It shortened their lifespan. She had used it on him. You tied your life to mine? Elias asked, stunned. I tied my future to yours, she corrected. The aftermath of Silence Kareth's conspiracy unraveled quickly once the psychic network returned. He had engineered microdisruptions to test severing the shared consciousness permanently. Without unity, the Empire would fracture, allowing a militaristic faction to seize control. But what none of them anticipated was human resilience. In silence, Elias functioned normally. In silence, he reacted fastest. His sacrifice became legend. Across the Orion Arm, Varelian citizens whispered, vocally whispered, the story of the human who did not fear the quiet. For the first time, the Empire reconsidered its assumptions about individuality. Nereth enacted reforms. Redundant communication systems were installed, some designed by human engineers. Psychic dependency was reduced. Diversity of thought was no longer viewed as inefficiency. Elias remained at her side, but he was changed. A faint shimmer now traced beneath his skin, evidence of Varelian biocore integration. He could not hear the full neural stream, but sometimes he sensed emotions like distant echoes. He and Nereth spoke often in the Astral Garden. "Does it frighten you?" she asked one evening. "What?" "That you are no longer entirely human." He considered it. "Does it frighten you that you gave part of yourself to one?" She smiled faintly.
No, 6.
The Blade remembered months later, during a quiet council meeting, Elias stood once more at the foot of the dais. But he was no longer merely a guard. He was the bridge-bearer, a symbol of unity between mind and silence. A young Varelian noble approached him after court. "Is it true," she asked timidly, "that you stepped into death without hearing the warning?" He nodded. "Weren't you afraid?" He looked up at the vaulted crystal ceiling. "Of course I was." "Then why move?" Elias thought of Mars dust storms, of human cities built in hostile places, of friendships forged without psychic bonds. "Because sometimes," he said quietly, "you don't need to hear someone's thoughts to know they shouldn't fall." 7. The quiet between stars. Years passed. The Empire stabilized. The alliance with Earth deepened. And the palace never again fell fully silent. Safeguards prevented it. But occasionally, Nereth would dim the neural hum intentionally during private moments. She and Elias would sit together without shared thoughts flooding the air. Just two beings in quiet understanding. "You saved more than my life," she once told him. "You saved our individuality." He shook his head. "I just reacted." "No," she said. "You chose." In the end, historians would record the event as the Day of Broken Resonance. But among the people, it had another name, the Human Stand. 8. A Blade's echo decades later, when Elias's hair had grayed and the shimmer beneath his skin had faded to faint starlight, he stood once more in the throne chamber. Nereth's glow was softer now. The biocore she had given him had shortened her reign, just as she knew it would. "Do you regret it?" he asked gently. "Never," she said. The Empire had changed because of that silence. It had learned to speak aloud, to question, to protect without unanimity. When she finally passed, the neural hum did not vanish. It remained steady. But for a single moment, just one, every Varelian mind withdrew voluntarily. A chosen silence. A tribute. Elias stood alone in that quiet. And he did not fear it. Because once, when the palace fell silent in betrayal, he had stepped forward without hesitation. And in doing so, he had taught an empire that unity was strongest when silence was not a weapon, but a choice. The day Empress Nereth Valis died, the palace did not dim. It did not tremble. It did not fracture into psychic chaos. It breathed. The throne chamber was filled beyond capacity. Nobles, military commanders, engineers, diplomats from Earth, even delegates from rival star systems who once feared Varelian supremacy. The living crystal walls shimmered in restrained twilight hues, as though the structure itself understood the gravity of the hour. Elias Ward stood beside her resting form. He no longer wore standard Terran armor. Instead, he bore ceremonial plating forged from both Martian alloy and Varelian light crystal. Across his chest, Etched in twin languages were the words, "In silence we choose." Neritha's physical form appeared unchanged, still luminous, still regal, but her glow was softer now, no longer powered by the immense biocore that once fueled half the palace lattice. Part of that power lived on in Elias. She had known the cost decades ago. She had paid it willingly. High Chancellor Sarita stepped forward, her voice carrying across both air and thought. Today we honor Nerith Valis, sovereign of unified resonance, keeper of the bridge, she who chose silence. At that final title, the chamber shifted. Every Varelian present withdrew from the neural stream. Not by force, not by sabotage,
but by choice.
The psychic hum faded. And for the second time in Elias Ward's life, the palace fell silent. But this silence was different. It was not a weapon. It was not fear.
It was respect.
Thousands of luminous beings stood in shared isolation, each mind alone, yet united in intention. Elias felt the absence like a cool wind across his skin, and he bowed his head. X, the human who stayed. After the ceremonial silence ended and the neural lattice resumed its harmonic song, the question echoed across the empire. What would become of the human? Elias could have returned to Earth. The Terran coalition offered him a seat in parliament, military command, even a governorship on Mars Colony 7. He declined them all. Instead, he remained on Aerith Prime, not as consort, not as ruler, but as advisor of independent thought. It was a position that had never existed before him. In council chambers, when debates grew dangerously unified, when ideas flowed too smoothly and dissent began dissolving under psychic consensus, Elias would raise one gloved hand. "Pause the stream," he would say calmly. And they would. The Empire learned to argue aloud, to disagree without immediate mental blending. Innovation flourished. Cultural art forms changed. Music once composed entirely through harmonic resonance began incorporating human-style instruments, strings, percussion, wind vibrations carried through air instead of thought. Varelian children were taught something unprecedented in their history: solitude. Private reflection became sacred, not suspicious. And every year, on the anniversary of the broken resonance, the entire empire observed 1 hour of chosen silence. They called it the quiet between stars. 11. Echoes of a blade. Elias aged in a way Varelians did not. Lines formed at the corners of his eyes. His steps grew slower. The shimmer beneath his skin faded to a faint silver vein near his heart, the remnant of Neritha's biocore fragment, still sustaining him beyond ordinary human longevity. Doctors from both species studied him carefully. He was living proof that biology and culture could intertwine without domination. One evening, decades after the assassination attempt, Elias requested access to the sealed archive chamber. Within it lay the crystalline weapon Kareth had used, the blade meant for the Empress's heart. It was inert now, suspended in a stasis field. Elias stood before it alone. "I don't hate you," he murmured softly. The blade, of course, did not respond. But he remembered the moment clearly. The flash. The impact. The choice. Historians often described his act as instinct. They were wrong. He had chosen. In the fraction of a second between seeing the strike and feeling the wound, he had made a decision that would cost him everything. And he would make it again. Because in that instant, he had not been Terran or Varelian. He had simply been someone unwilling to watch another fall. 12. The final conversation. Elias knew when his borrowed time was ending. The biocore fragment that sustained him pulsed irregularly. It had never been meant to function in a human body for nearly a century. He requested one last gathering in the astral garden. The vines still floated without support, glowing gently under the violet sky. The air carried the same faint harmonic hum he remembered from his youth. The new Empress, Neritha's successor, young by Varelian standards, knelt beside him. "You altered the trajectory of an empire," she said softly. "I tripped in front of a blade," Elias replied with a faint smile. She tilted her luminous head. "Why did you never seek power?" He gazed upward at the stars. "Because power wasn't what she needed." "Then what was?" He exhaled slowly. "Someone willing to stand in the quiet." The Empress reached for the faint silver vein near his heart. "Her essence remains within you," she said. "No," Elias corrected gently. "It remains within all of you. I just happened to carry the first spark." The neural stream began to quiet around them, not commanded, but sensed. Word of his failing strength spread across the lattice. Elias closed his eyes. "I was afraid that first time," he whispered. "Of death?" the Empress asked. "Of being too late." A soft glow surrounded him. "You were not," she said. 13. When the palace fell silent again. The moment Elias Ward's heart stopped, something extraordinary happened. The palace did not shut down. The neural lattice did not falter. Instead, every Varelian across the Empire, from distant frontier worlds to the capital spires of Aerith Prime, voluntarily disconnected at once. No command, no signal, no coercion, a shared understanding. The silence that followed was absolute. And this time, it was for him. Terran embassies reported the phenomenon in stunned confusion. Human diplomats described it as if half the stars had blinked out simultaneously. For 60 seconds, an empire of trillions stood alone inside their own minds. They felt grief individually. They processed it privately. They honored him not through unity, but through chosen separation. When the neural stream returned, it carried something new. Not dependency, not fear, but gratitude. 14. Legacy of the Bridge-Bearer. Elias Ward was buried not in a tomb, but in the astral garden. At his request, no statue was erected. Instead, a simple Martian stone marker was placed at the base of a luminous vine. Inscribed in both languages, he heard no thoughts, and still he understood. Generations passed. The alliance between Earth and Varelia became the foundation of a larger interstellar coalition. Species once wary of psychic dominance now trusted the Empire's restraint. Military academies across human space taught the human stand as required study. Varelian scholars developed entire philosophical schools around the doctrine of chosen silence. The palace never again fell silent by force, but it fell silent every year by choice. And in that quiet hour, children would ask their elders, "Why do we disconnect?" And the elders would answer, "Because once, when silence was used as a weapon, a human stepped forward without hearing our thoughts and gave us back the right to have them." 15. The quiet between stars centuries later, long after memory faded into legend, the astral gardens still glowed. Visitors from Earth would stand before the simple stone and feel something they couldn't quite name. Not psychic resonance. Not technological marvel. Something simpler. Courage. Above them, the living crystal towers shimmered under twin moons. And once each year, when the hour of remembrance arrived, the palace would dim. The neural hum would fade. Across worlds and systems, trillions would stand alone in their own minds. Not in fear, not in weakness, but in honor of a man who proved that unity is strongest when it survives silence. And somewhere in that quiet, between heartbeats, between stars, the echo of a single choice would endure forever. When the palace fell silent, a human had taken the blade. And because of that choice, An empire learned how to stand in the quiet without falling.